Hey again, YouTube. Nut job with a machete back with, well, of course it's a machete. This is Cold Steel's Tanto Machete. Now, this is their latest iteration of their small machete lines. Now, you might have seen my Bowie machete review. If you haven't, I'll put a link right here. Now, in that review, I mentioned that I didn't really like the sheath. Well, Cold Steel addressed that in the sheath for this thing. And you know what, I've already done some test footage, so if you want to see what this does against, say, deadfall, I'll put a link to that test video, testing nut jobs machetes, right here. But let's take a look at this thing on its own. Well, you can see, unlike the Bowie's clipped point, this obviously has a modified Tanto with a slight clip on the back. It's your standard carbon steel. A little bit springy, but of course, with it being this short, you don't really anticipate it to be super springy. It does have some flex, so when you chop into stuff, you don't really have to worry about bending the crap out of it, which is a good thing, because with a machete this small, what you're going to find is you're probably going to have to put in a little more force if you're using it as a machete. Small material, anything up to and including about twice my thumb, no problem. Any of the bigger, thicker materials, say around like my wrist or something like that, then you have to do a little bit more work. I've chopped with it, split with it, I tested it on bottles, I even tested it against, well, a little bit of pork, just because this is me and I'm crazy. And it performed more than adequately in all of those. In the larger materials, I was splitting some choke cherry wood. You did feel a little bit of resistance, which I think might have been actually the material, because I can't really polish it up as much as I did the Bowie. But that said, this thing is actually pretty damn impressive. Now, I mentioned that the sheath had improved. Well, what did they do? Well, as you can see, the sheath design is very similar to what they had before. Single snap retention, big belt loop. But if you guys remember the sheath from before, let's see if I can get a little bit closer. You remember it was kind of wavy and the rivet heads were popped through and everything. Well, on this, sorry, it's a little piece of cord, it got stuck on there. On this, none of that happens. On both sides, the rivets are pretty much flat. In addition, the material is actually, it's compressible. It's not just like it was regular nylon sheath. It actually feels like there's a little bit of, even if it's cardboard, it's pretty good, material inside so that impacts directly to it won't damage the blade. Major upside with the bottom here, and I hope they translate this over to their Bowie too, is an enclosed toe on it, basically. You remember that on the Bowie, it was two flat pieces of plastic riveted in place. Well, this one, with that aggressive Tanto point, and it also with the Bowie with its very aggressive clip point, I was a little worried that should any of the seams give up here, it might go through the bottom. This addresses that. It's still, you know, a nylon Cordura sheath, so it's not really anything to write home about, but I'm happy that Cold Steel has made some improvements to it. Now, the knife itself, well, the machete itself, obviously I think of it a bit more as a larger knife rather than a machete, a small machete. But given the actual work I can do with it, this could conceivably either go with Mick, the Bowie machete, or it could replace it on a few of the trips. It's slightly heavier, or at least it feels slightly heavier, because it has more weight forward. The clip point on the Bowie takes a little bit of the weight off the front end, where this one, all the weight is pretty much consistent until you get to the two transitions. That means that you get a little bit more power in the chop. Now, you know what, why don't we go to the test, and you can actually just see how much power on the chop, how well it slices, and all of that. So let's go to that and we'll be right back. Just using the tip. Slashed in, pretty damn deep. It's a penetration, and then did a quick cut down.
Just the tip. Did a couple quick chops. One right in here. A really good one, nice and deep down here, just above the sickle damage from the Iranian sickle.
Well, I mean, as you can see, in a weapon sense, this thing works really well. I mean, penetration, it's a Tanto point, it goes through. The few little slashes, those were mostly done with the transition, mostly done with the tip. And given the fact that that transition and the tip is very, very, very sharp, well, the damage to the pork kind of attested to what it would do. A couple simple little chops, mostly hitting my stand and going through the meat. It's a straight edge. It doesn't really do a fantastic dig in on a large surface chop for, you know, large surfaces, but on wood it works just fine. So this is basically right after those tests. So let's see how well the edge held up. It's not bad actually. Yeah, it's close to my fingers. And how did the Tanto point hold up? It actually held up pretty well. And I mean, the choke cherry wood, it's kind of dense. And I will admit, I hit the backing on my stand when I was doing each one of those chops, and even when I was doing the chop down, I kind of hit the metal screws that are behind those screw heads. And I was worried that I would chip the edge or anything, but there's no rollover and no chipping on it. So, I mean, I might touch it up a little bit just to make it that much sharper, because this is me, and if it's not, you know, so sharp that I'm afraid of it, it's not sharp enough. Well, I mean, the general principle behind this thing, small machete, carry it like a big knife if you want to, or you can carry it like a small machete. You could... There's always a chance you could use this in a tactical situation or anything like that. But to me, a small machete, pretty useful, relatively easy to pop into a backpack or a bug-out bag, or just a strap on the outside, because it really doesn't take up that much space. And it's not that heavy. And in fact, you know what? I haven't mentioned the specs yet, so why don't I point out that the specs are below if you wanted to see what it's made out of, weight, all that stuff. But this thing is actually pretty decent overall. It's definitely comparable to the Bowie. I mean, beautiful edge on it. A little bit of polishing with a 6000 grit stone. Got a really nice mirror edge on it. Now, oh, I never actually mentioned this part. I wrapped up the handle with more Yonex wrap. The reason for that is, just like with the Bowie machete, because it's so small, you might feel a little bit of jarring if you hit into a very dense pocket or a knot or anything like that. So that's one thing that I did. But beautiful overall machete, really good little chopper. I have to admit, it's held up pretty well through all the tests and everything like that. So it's definitely a thumbs up in my book. So I mean, one of the main things that I can see this being used for is kind of that transition point between your big knife and your machete. If you didn't want to bring both those tools, you could kind of bring this, and it fits that gap in between them. It doesn't weigh very much, you know, like I said, the specs and everything are below. It's fairly compact. It's about the size of, you know, a fair-sized Bowie, or the Bowie machete. And, you know, you could pack it in a bug-out bag or on the outside of your camp bag. It's really not going to hinder you that much. And I mean, this thing is pretty comfortable when you're using it. The handle's wrapped in Yonex again. You're going to find that with a small machete, you're probably going to use a little bit more force when you're hacking into stuff. But if you've got to choose, you might as well choose this one because it will actually get the job done. I could easily see someone doing their entire shelter with this. You know, processing wood, not a problem. Processing game, it's a little big for that, but I mean, you could still do it if you had to. And as a general purpose tool, I find it's actually really, really nice. Well, that's about it, guys. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you like videos like this, please feel free to click like. Feel free to subscribe for more videos like this in the future. And as always, feel free to share this video as much as you want. Until next time, guys, I'm Nutjob with a machete. With my new machete, stay sharp.